The unyielding law, the cold metal walls of the prison cell felt like they were closing in. It was hard to breathe in this place, and even harder to hold on to any hope. The air was damp, filled with the smell of sweat and iron. She sat on the hard cot, her arms crossed over her chest, staring at the small window that only let in a sliver of light. The universe outside felt so far away, a world she might never see again. Her name was Kira, and she had been captured by the Vulpine Empire, a ruthless race of conquerors who had decided that she was a threat. For what? She still didn't know, but the law was clear. Once you were labeled an enemy of the Vulpine, your life was no longer your own. You were property to be discarded or used as they saw fit. And Kira? She was a prisoner, a mere pawn in their grand game. The sound of heavy boots echoed in the hallway, growing louder with each passing second. The door to her cell slammed open with a jarring force, and the guards just stepped inside. They were tall and imposing, their uniforms dark and gleaming. Their eyes never softened, never showed even the slightest hint of empathy. They were soldiers, and soldiers followed orders. Kira's heart raced. She knew what was coming. One of the guards, a hulking figure with scars across his face, stepped forward. "It's time," he growled, his voice low and cold. "The Vulpine law will be carried out." Kira's mind raced, her thoughts flashing through every possible outcome. She had heard stories of what happened to those who defied the Empire. They were tortured, broken, their wills crushed beneath the weight of the law. She had never been a fighter. She had never been one to raise her voice in rebellion. But now, it seemed that no matter what, she was going to have to face whatever the Vulpine Empire had planned for her. The guard grabbed her by the arm and yanked her to her feet. His grip was tight, painful, but she didn't fight back. There was no point. Resistance would only make things worse. They marched her down the narrow hallway, the walls lined with prisoners who watched her pass by, their eyes hollow and defeated. Kira kept her gaze ahead, refusing to meet anyone's eyes. She didn't want to see the pity. She didn't want to feel their despair. She already had enough of her own to carry Dot at the end of the hall. The doors to the courtroom swung open. The atmosphere inside was sterile and harsh, the kind of place where decisions were made with no compassion, no understanding. A long, cold table stood at the center, surrounded by figures dressed in the regal armor of the Vulpine Empire. At the head of the table sat Commander Orin, the leader of the Vulpine forces. His eyes were cold, calculating like the rest of his kind. Kira was shoved forward, forced to kneel before the council. The guards stood at attention behind her, their presence a constant reminder that there was no escape. Orin's voice echoed through the room. "Kira, you are here today because you stand against the Vulpine Empire. You were found guilty of treason and defiance. The law is clear. There can be no mercy, no second chances." Kira swallowed hard, her throat dry. She had heard the speeches before. The Vulpine were unyielding. They believed in the strength of their laws and in the absolute authority of their empire. There was no room for weakness, no space for failure. And yet, as she knelt there, her mind raced for some way out, some way to escape this cold judgment. But there was none. The silence in the room stretched out like a thick fog, suffocating her. Kira knew that whatever happened next would determine the rest of her life, or perhaps the end of it. She had no way of knowing how this would go, but the certainty in Orin's voice told her that this would not end well. Then, without warning, the doors to the chamber opened again. A new figure entered. Unlike the others, his armor was not the gleaming black of the Vulpine, but a dull, matte shade as though it had seen years of battle. His steps were calm, measured, and Kira's eyes flickered over him, not knowing what to make of him. He wasn't one of them. Orin didn't seem pleased. He stiffened, his eyes narrowing. What is this? Who dares to interrupt the proceedings? A man stopped beside her, his gaze sweeping over the room before resting on Kira. There was something different about him, something not cold, not distant like the rest of the Empire. He looked at her as if he saw something more. And for the briefest moment, she thought she saw a flicker of kindness in his eyes. "I'm here to speak on her behalf," the man said, his voice calm, but carrying an undeniable authority. Kira's heart skipped a beat. Was this some sort of trick? Had they sent him to test her? She couldn't understand what was happening, but a spark of hope, small, fragile, began to grow inside her. "Speak, then," Orin snapped. "But know this, your words will carry no weight here." The man turned to Kira, his expression softening, just enough to be noticeable. "Kira," he said gently, "I know the Vulpine law is unyielding, but sometimes even the strongest walls can be broken. You may be here now, but you are not alone." The words hung in the air, and for the first time, Kira felt something stir inside her, something more than fear. It was the faintest glimmer of hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, her fate wasn't as sealed as it seemed. The weight of the gaze. Kira sat in silence, her hands trembling at her sides, unsure of what to make of the man who had stepped into her life, into this courtroom. The Vulpine Empire had always been unyielding, a cruel machine that ground down the weak. But this man, there was something different about him. His voice had been soft, even kind. His eyes, though sharp with intelligence, seemed to hold a depth of understanding that Kira hadn't seen before. Orin, the commanding officer of the Vulpine, didn't share the same sentiment. His face twisted with anger, his mouth curling into a sneer. "Do you think your presence will change anything?" "The law is the law," he barked, his words cutting through the air like a knife. "Your plea is meaningless." But the man was unfazed. He didn't even flinch as Orin's eyes glared into him. Instead, he turned back to Kira, his gaze warm, as if trying to comfort her in the middle of this storm. "Kira," he said her name again, this time with more conviction. "You don't have to face this alone. I can help you." The sincerity in his voice sent a strange feeling rushing through her, something between fear and curiosity. Could she trust him? Was he truly offering her a way out, or was this another trick designed to break her spirit? She stared at him, still unsure. Her heart raced in her chest. She couldn't afford to trust anyone, not after everything that had happened. But there was something about him, something that told her she wasn't entirely alone. She hadn't felt that in so long. "Why?" she whispered, almost too quietly for him to hear. "Why are you doing this for me?" He didn't respond immediately, instead locking eyes with Orin, who was now clearly frustrated. The commander's glare was icy, but the man did not back down. His calmness seemed to infuriate Orin further, his fingers tapping sharply on the metal table. The man took a slow step toward Kira, closing the distance between them. His presence was calming, in stark contrast to the tension in the room. "Because," he began, his voice low but clear, "there's more to you than just a prisoner. There's more to this world than just laws and punishment. I've seen the cracks in the Empire, Kira, and I believe in fighting for something better." The words hung in the air, carrying weight. Kira's chest tightened. Was he implying that there was a way out of this? That there was a chance she could be more than just another prisoner of war? But as much as his words soothed her, doubt still gnawed at her. Could she trust him, or was he simply another face in the crowd, pretending to offer hope while really tightening the noose around her neck? Her eyes flicked to Orin, whose glare hadn't wavered. He was waiting for her to break, to beg. It wasn't the first time she had been in a situation like this, but something about the way this man looked at her was different. There was no mockery, no judgment. He didn't see her as a broken prisoner. He saw her as something more. Kira's voice came out in a quiet murmur. "What do you want from me?" A man finally broke his gaze from Orin and focused entirely on her. His expression softened further, the tension in his shoulders relaxing. "I want to give you a chance, Kira. The Empire's hold over you is not as tight as they believe. There's still a path forward, a path that doesn't involve surrendering to their cruelty." Orin shifted uncomfortably, clearly disturbed by the man's calm demeanor. His fingers dug into the edge of the table, and his voice cracked with fury. "Enough of this nonsense. Do not think that your words can sway me. The law is the law." The man turned toward Orin, his gaze narrowing. "And the law has failed you, hasn't it? The Vulpine Empire has become a machine of cruelty. I'm here to remind you that you're still human." Kira blinked, the weight of his words sinking in. Could it be true? Could she escape the Empire's grasp? Her life had always been defined by the cruelty of the Vulpine, by their laws, their punishments, their iron grip on her fate. And now, this stranger, this man, who didn't even belong to the Empire, was telling her she didn't have to be. Bound by it, her heart pounded. She needed to know more, but fear and doubt gripped her tightly. Before she could speak, the man turned to the guards, signaling them to step back. They hesitated but obeyed, their steps echoing loudly in the empty space. "What are you going to do?" Kira asked, her voice barely above a whisper. She felt vulnerable now, exposed in ways she hadn't before. This was a new kind of danger. "I'm not going to do anything," the man said. "You are. You are. The one who will choose if you stay a prisoner of the Empire or if you walk a different path." The room felt colder as the weight of his words sank into her. The Empire had always been her world, her prison. But now there was a crack in that world, and beyond it lay something she had never dared to imagine. Asterisk, the unlikely protector. The stillness in the room was suffocating. Kira's mind raced, her thoughts tangled in confusion. She had always known what her fate was. The Vulpine Empire had made it clear. You either obeyed or you disappeared. There were no in-betweens. And now, here she was, with a stranger who was offering her something that felt too impossible to accept. A way out. The guards, who had been poised to carry out Orin's orders, now stood awkwardly at the back of the room, uncertain of what was happening. It was clear they had no idea how to react to the situation. Kira barely noticed them. Her gaze was fixed on the man standing in front of her, the one who had broken the unspoken rules of the Vulpine Empire just by speaking her name with kindness. "Why are you helping me?" she asked again, the question that had been sitting at the back of her mind, gnawing at her. Her voice trembled, not from fear, but from the sheer weight of the situation. Was this some kind of setup? Was he trying to make her believe in something that wasn't real? The man hesitated, his eyes dark with an emotion Kira couldn't quite read. Then, with a quiet sigh, he answered, "I'm not just here to help you. I'm here because I believe there's more to life than servitude to the Empire. You're more than just a prisoner, Kira. You have something inside you they don't know about. Something that could change everything." The words felt heavy, like a challenge she didn't know how to accept. She was nothing more than a captive. What could she possibly have that the Vulpine Empire would fear? She didn't understand. "Why me?" she whispered, almost to herself. "Because," the man continued, his voice steady, "the Empire has failed to see your potential. They've written you off, just like they do to everyone they capture. But you're different. You just need someone to see it. Someone who isn't afraid to stand against the tide." Kira felt a flicker of something in her chest, something that might have been hope, but it quickly buried itself in doubt. Hope had never worked out for her. Hope had led to disappointment, to more chains and darker nights. "You're asking me to believe in something impossible," she said, her voice trembling. "You're asking me to trust you, a stranger, in a world that has never shown me kindness. You don't know me. You don't know what they've done to me." The man's face softened, and his eyes seemed to carry a deep, unspoken understanding. "I don't need to know everything about you to know that you're worth more than this. I'm not asking for blind trust, Kira. I'm offering you a chance to take control. You get to decide what happens next, not the Empire." Her heart pounded, each word from his mouth piercing through the thick cloud of fear that surrounded her. It was tempting, more tempting than anything she'd ever felt in the years of her captivity. But how could she trust him? How could she trust anyone in a world built on lies and power? A deep, cold silence filled the room as Orin stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "Enough of this. This is a waste of time." His voice was sharp, filled with contempt. "The law is absolute. You'll learn that, man, just like everyone else who tries to defy it." The man turned slowly, his expression unreadable. For a moment, Kira thought he might back down, that he might just leave and let the law take its course. But instead, he spoke with quiet intensity. "The law has already failed. It's led to nothing but death and destruction. How many more must suffer before the Empire realizes its mistakes?" Orin's face twisted in rage. He stepped forward, his armored boots thudding heavily on the floor. "You dare to question the will of the Empire?" He spat. "You will learn that some laws can never be undone." The man's calmness only seemed to provoke Orin more, but he didn't flinch. Instead, he turned back to Kira, his gaze unwavering. "You don't have to be a pawn, Kira. You don't have to follow orders anymore. Together, we can break the chains that bind us all." Kira's heart thudded in her chest. Every part of her screamed at her to remain cautious, to keep her distance, to trust nothing. But the sincerity in his eyes, the quiet defiance in his stance, it was different. He wasn't like the others. He wasn't like the soldiers who had always treated her like an object to be discarded. "How?" she finally managed to ask, her voice trembling as she took a step closer to him. "How can I trust you? How can I trust anything in this place?" The man gave a faint smile, but it wasn't one of arrogance. It was a smile full of quiet understanding. "Because you already know, deep down, Kira, you know this isn't the life you were meant to lead. The Empire can't take that from you. Only you can give it away." The tension in the room was palpable. Orin's fury boiled over, but the man's words had already planted a seed in Kira's mind. She could feel it, a tiny spark of hope flickering in the darkness. Could this be real? Was it possible that she could finally be free? Before she could answer, the man reached out, his hand gently resting on her shoulder. "Trust yourself, Kira. You're stronger than you think." Kira looked into his eyes, her mind a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. She had spent so long being broken, so long believing she was nothing. But now, for the first time in a long time, she felt something shift. Maybe, just maybe, this man was offering her the one thing she had never dared to hope for, a chance to choose her own fate. A secret beneath the surface. The room was thick with tension. Orin, his face twisted in disgust, took a step back as the man's words lingered in the air. The silence that followed was suffocating. Kira's heart pounded in her chest, each beat louder than the last. She felt like she was standing at the edge of a precipice, with no way of knowing if what lay beyond was salvation or destruction. The man's words, though, had stirred something inside her, something buried beneath the weight of her captivity. Stood beside her, his presence like an anchor, calm and steady against the storm of her doubts. His eyes never left hers, as though silently urging her to make a decision. Kira couldn't shake the feeling that this was a crossroads, a moment. That would define the rest of her life. I don't understand, she whispered, her voice barely audible. She didn't know if she was speaking to him, to herself, or to the very world that had trapped her here. You speak as if there's a choice, but there isn't one. I've lived under their rules my entire life. There's no escaping it. You don't know what they'll do to me if I even think of defying them. The man's expression softened, but there was an intensity behind his gaze that cut through her words. I know what they're capable of, he said, his voice low. But I also know what happens when people give up without even trying. You've been given the illusion of no choice for so long, Kira. The truth is, we always have a choice. You've just been too afraid to see it. Her breath caught in her throat. We always have a choice. Those words echoed in her mind, like a distant whisper that she had almost forgotten how to hear. She had been so focused on surviving, on enduring, that she hadn't realized that maybe survival wasn't enough anymore. Maybe it was time to live. But could she really make that choice? Could she really defy the empire that had crushed so many like her? Before Kira could respond, Oren's voice cut through the air, sharp and unforgiving. You're wasting time. Traitor, he spat. Your words are meaningless. You think you can save her? There is no escape. The empire will find you both, and it will end badly for both of you. The man's lips curled into a faint smile, a quiet defiance dancing in his eyes. You're wrong, Oren. The empire is its own downfall. It's already too late for it. The cracks have already formed. And Kira, he turned to Kira, his expression softening once more. We have the chance to expose those cracks. Together, we can break the system from the inside. Kira's mind reeled. Was it really that simple? Could they expose the empire? For what it was, unravel its hold on the galaxy? The very thought seemed too large, too impossible to believe. Yet there was something about his words, something that made the walls around her begin to crumble. Expose them? Kira repeated, almost in disbelief. How? I'm just a prisoner, nothing more. You're more than that, the man replied, his voice steady and full of conviction. You're a symbol. The Vulpine Empire needs you to stay broken, to stay silent so they can control everyone else. But if you stand up, if you show them that even their most helpless prisoners can defy them, it will send a message far beyond these walls. Kira's heart quickened. Could she really be the one to stand up? Could she truly challenge the empire? The idea seemed absurd. But then, why was she feeling this surge of energy within her, this strange pull towards something bigger than herself? The man extended a hand toward her, his gesture open, inviting. I can show you how to take the first step, he said softly. I'll be there with you every step of the way. You don't have to fight this alone. Kira hesitated. Every fiber of her being told her to stay still, to not trust him, to play it safe. But her gaze fell to his hand, and for the first time in a long while, she realized something. He wasn't asking her to follow him blindly. He was offering her a partnership, a choice, a chance. But it wasn't just his offer that drew her in. It was the quiet, unwavering conviction in his eyes that made her believe maybe, just maybe, it was possible to change things. Maybe she didn't have to be the helpless pawn anymore. Taking a deep breath, Kira slowly reached out and placed her hand in his. The moment their fingers touched, something unspoken passed between them. A silent promise, an understanding that this moment would change everything. Oren, who had been watching in stunned silence, finally erupted. You fool! Do you have any idea what you're doing? His voice was thick with fury, his body shaking with rage. This will be your downfall. The Empire will destroy both of you. The man's gaze never wavered from Kira's, even as Oren's fury intensified. His grip on her hand tightened, offering reassurance, But the moment was interrupted by the sharp sound of footsteps approaching quickly down the hall. More guards, more reinforcements. Orin had clearly called for backup. We don't have much time, the man whispered urgently, his tone suddenly serious. They'll come for us now. If you're ready, we need to move. Kira's heart raced. There was no turning back now. No more safety and submission. No more playing by the rules of the Empire. This was it. The moment she either chose to fight or stay broken. With a final glance at the man beside her, Kira nodded. I'm ready, she said, her voice stronger than she had ever imagined it could be. The escape was about to begin. Asterisk the escape plan. Sound of heavy footsteps echoed in the corridor, growing louder with each passing second. Kira's pulse raced, the adrenaline coursing through her veins like wildfire. She could hear the guards, their boots pounding against the floor, coming closer. Her mind raced. There was no turning back now. She had made her choice. The man squeezed, her hand reassuringly, his grip firm and steady. His calm demeanor was almost infectious, and despite the rising tension, Kira found herself standing taller. This is what it means to be free, she thought, though it still felt like an unfamiliar concept. We need to move. Now, the man whispered urgently, his voice a low hum in the stillness of the room. Kira nodded, swallowing her fear. What's the plan? There's a hidden passage beneath the prison, he replied, his eyes scanning the room for any sign of an escape route. It's not well known, and even fewer people know how to access it, but we can use it to get out. Kira felt her heart sink. A hidden passage? She had spent so many years in this place, yet she had never heard of anything like it. The Vulpine Empire was nothing if not thorough in its control. The thought that there could be a way out, a secret path hidden beneath her very feet, made her both hopeful and afraid. You're sure it's safe? Kira asked, doubt creeping into her voice. What if it's a trap? The man met her gaze, his expression serious. We don't have time to question it. If we wait too long, they'll seal the doors, and we'll be trapped. Trust me. Trust him. The words echoed in Kira's mind as she looked at the man, this stranger who had come into her life with such quiet determination, promising her something she had given up on long ago. Hope. The sounds of approaching guards grew louder, more distinct. Kira could feel the heavy weight of time pressing against her, but something about the man's unwavering calmness made her believe. Maybe this is our only chance. All right, she whispered, her voice steady despite the fear swirling in her chest. Let's go. The man led her to a hidden section of the wall at the far end of the room. Kira had never seen it before, but the way he moved, so sure, so deliberate, told her he knew exactly what he was doing. He pressed a hidden panel on the wall, and with a soft mechanical hiss, the floor beneath them shifted. A trapdoor appeared, revealing a narrow staircase leading down into the darkness below. Kira hesitated for just a moment. The fear of the unknown gnawed at her, but it was nothing compared to the fear of staying in this place. She took a deep breath and stepped forward, following the man into the shadows. The air was damp and cold as they descended into the hidden passage. The walls were rough stone, and the flickering light from a small, portable lantern cast long shadows across the narrow hallway. The passage seemed to stretch on forever, its length obscured by the darkness that swallowed everything in its path. But Kira knew they couldn't afford to slow down. If they were caught now. The man glanced over his shoulder, his expression hardening. Keep moving. The moment we stop, we're dead. Kira nodded, trying to push the panic down, trying to focus on the steps ahead. But with every footstep that echoed in the tight space, she couldn't help but feel as though they were walking deeper into a trap. We're almost there, the man muttered, breaking the silence. He sounded confident, but Kira could hear the tension in his voice. He was trying to reassure her, but it wasn't enough. The cold, oppressive weight of the Empire's might loomed over them, always just a step behind. The passage finally opened into a small chamber, the air cooler and fresher than it had been further down. Kira's eyes darted around, taking in the unfamiliar surroundings. The room was stark, almost empty, save for a large crate in the corner and a few discarded tools. But what caught her attention was the narrow tunnel leading off to the side. It was their way out. "That's the exit," the man said, pointing toward the tunnel. "Once we're through there, we'll be in the lower level of the city. It's not much, but it's enough to disappear for a while." Kira's heart raced. The lower city was a maze, full of underground markets and dark corners where people who wanted to remain unseen could blend in. She had heard whispers of such places, but they were always too far removed from her reality. Now, it was her only hope. As they moved toward the tunnel, the sound of footsteps behind them froze Kira's blood. The guards were close, too close. "Go." The man barked, his hand urging Kira forward with a forceful push. She didn't need to be told twice. She dashed into the tunnel, her heart in her throat as she heard the unmistakable sound of boots hitting the stone floor. They were coming. The tunnel narrowed further, forcing Kira to duck low as she ran. Her lungs burned with each breath, but she pushed forward. She couldn't stop now. She wouldn't stop. Not when there was a chance, however slim, to escape. Man was close behind her, his presence a steady force, propelling her forward. "Keep going," he urged, his voice more urgent now. "We're almost there." Kira's eyes strained against the darkness, her hands pressed against the cold stone walls for guidance. She could feel the walls closing in on her, as though the entire tunnel was trying to swallow them whole. The sound of pursuing guards grew louder, and Kira's heart thudded in her chest like a drum. "Please, please don't let us get caught," she thought, her breath ragged. And then, just as she thought the tunnel would close in on them entirely, the distant glimmer of light appeared ahead. They were almost there. The exit was within reach, but the sound of approaching footsteps, too many to count, grew deafening. "We have to move now." The man shouted. Kira pushed herself harder, her legs screaming in protest. The light was growing stronger, the end of the tunnel just ahead. Asterisk. The final decision to the light at the end of the tunnel grew brighter, but Kira's mind was a whirlwind. Every footstep, every breath felt like it might be her last. The sound of the guards chasing them, shouting orders, grew louder. She could feel their presence closing in on them, a constant reminder that there was no turning back now. The man in front of her moved with precision, every step calculated, his eyes scanning the tunnel ahead. He was faster, more agile, and for a brief moment, Kira envied him. He didn't seem afraid. His face was set, determined. He had made his decision long ago, but Kira was still torn. Could she really escape? Could she truly defy the Empire, knowing what it would cost her? She had seen the brutality of the Vulpine firsthand. They didn't let go of their own. If they caught her, there would be no mercy, no second chances. The tunnel began to widen, and she could see the faint outline of a hidden exit ahead, a metal grate leading to a back alley in the lower city. Freedom. But the price of that freedom would be steep. She could already hear the guards pounding down the tunnel behind them, their pursuit relentless. They had only moments before the Empire's iron grip closed in. The man turned back to look at her, his eyes serious, but there was something else in them now. A quiet understanding, as though he knew exactly what she was feeling. "This is it, Kira," he said, his voice low and urgent. "There's no time for second guesses. We either fight for this freedom, or we give it up." Kira's breath caught in her throat. She stopped for a brief moment, her chest tightening with fear and uncertainty. She had always followed orders, always lived in the shadow of the Empire's will. The idea of defying them, of choosing her own path, seemed so foreign, so impossible. But as she looked into the man's eyes, she realized that he believed in her. And for the first time in her life, Kira wondered if maybe, just maybe, she could believe in herself too. What if they catch us? Kira asked, her voice shaking. What if we're not ready? The man didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stopped and turned fully toward her, his gaze softening. You may never feel ready, Kira, but if you wait until you feel ready, you'll never move. The Empire has stolen enough from you. Don't let it steal your future too. The sound of boots grew nearer, but it wasn't just the guards that pressed in on her now. It was the weight of the choice she had to make. The man was right. She had been a prisoner of fear, of the Empire's control, for so long. But now, with a single decision, she could break free. The tunnel was almost behind them. The grate so close she could almost taste the fresh air of the city outside. The world beyond the Empire's walls waited for them. A world Kira had only dreamed about in whispers. Do I have the courage to walk through this door? Suddenly, the man grabbed her arm, pulling her close. This is our only chance, he said firmly. If we hesitate, they will catch us. Are you ready to choose freedom? Her heart pounded in her chest, the decision weighing heavy in her mind. She knew there was no going back, no second chances. If she stepped into the unknown, she was leaving behind everything she had known, her past, her identity, the life she had lived under the Empire's suffocating control. But there was something else that stirred deep inside her, a quiet strength she had never known. The chains of her captivity had been heavy, but they were not unbreakable. She had the power to break them. Kira took a deep breath, the cold air filling her lungs, clearing her mind. She made her choice. I'm ready, she said, her voice stronger than it had ever been. Let's go. With one last glance back at the approaching guards, the man yanked the grate open, the sound of metal scraping against stone deafening in the silence of the tunnel. They were out. They had made it, but their escape was far from over. The alley outside was dark, the air thick with the smells of the lower city. It was a world Kira had only heard of in rumors, dirty, dangerous, filled with shadows and criminals, but it was also free. The Empire's reach didn't extend here, and for the first time in her life, Kira could feel the pulse of something new, something raw and alive. The man was already moving, leading her through the shadows, staying close to the buildings, avoiding the main roads. But Kira's mind was still racing. What happens now? She wondered. The city was vast, and the dangers of the Empire had not disappeared just because they were out of the prison. Where are we going? She asked, keeping her voice low. There's a safe house, the man said, not breaking stride. It's a place where we can lay low, figure out our next move. But we can't stop. Not yet. Kira nodded, her legs aching from the sprint. But the energy inside her kept her going. She didn't know what would happen next, but for the first time, the future felt wide open. No more waiting. No more following the path set by others. This was her choice, and it had only just begun. As they disappeared into the labyrinth of the lower city, the final words the man had spoken echoed in her mind. You're stronger than you think. Kira knew now that this was only the beginning. And whatever came next, she would face it on her own terms. Asterisk.